What does the calm before absolute chaos look like? That's exactly what this episode sets out to show us. Rhaenyra's problems just keep piling up with no end in sight. 3 green armies are marching toward her from 3 different directions, while King's Landing remains firmly under the Greens' control through Queen Helaena. At the same time, Ormond Hightower is making his presence felt from afar, steadily tightening his grip on the capital without even being there himself. The episode is titled Unbent, Unbroken. It's an incredibly interesting choice. These words are closely tied to House Martell, one of the most fascinating houses in all of Westeros. Their full house motto is Unbowed, Unbent, Unbroken, and they rule the Kingdom of Dorne. Keeping that theme in mind, one of the fiercest warriors in the Dance of the Dragons has now begun marching with a relatively small force. But the real question is, what's happening inside King's Landing? This entire episode feels like the final warning before a massive storm. Every conversation, every decision, and every move is building towards something much bigger. So, let's break it all down. Just like the previous episodes this season, the opening credits begin with the sound of pounding war drums. However, this time there's an important detail near the end of the sequence. We see Corlys Velaryon's threadwork beginning to unravel, possibly symbolizing that Corlys is slowly losing his commitment to this devastating conflict. Another new addition shows Alicent alongside Helaena in the tapestry. Then, in the final moments of the opening, we see 2 figures tearing apart the fabric itself. Those 2 are Ormond Hightower and Daeron Targaryen, and this episode finally makes it clear why they're represented that way. We'll come back to that in much more detail later. But first, let's talk about Ser Criston Cole's latest mission. The episode opens with scouts from both the Riverlands and the North discovering that someone is destroying the bridge across the Blackwater Rush. Whoever's behind it is trying to prevent the Riverlands army from reaching Tumbleton. If you remember the previous episode, Grand Maester Orwyle suggested that instead of launching a direct dragon assault on Tumbleton, Rhaenyra should send the Riverlands army to capture the city instead. Now, someone is deliberately delaying that army's advance, and both the Northern Scouts and the Riverlands soldiers already know exactly who's responsible. It's Ser Criston Cole. By destroying the bridge, Criston is buying precious time and making sure the Riverlands army can't reach Tumbleton before the Greens are fully prepared. That betrayal left scars that never truly healed. If you remember, this wasn't even the first time Criston accepted what he believed would be his own end. After brutally killing Joffrey Lonmouth during Rhaenyra and Laena's wedding feast, he fully expected his life to be over. He was ready to say goodbye to the world right there. The only reason he survived was because Alicent Hightower stopped him. That's why Criston remains fiercely loyal to Alicent. In his eyes, she gave him a second chance when no one else would. And that's exactly why he's willing to sacrifice everything, even his own life, for the Greens. Gwaine Hightower even tells Criston that he should return to Oldtown, the ancestral seat of House Hightower, where he could still serve his family and live with honor. But Cole has no interest in that. Long ago, he already accepted that his story would end on the battlefield. As far as he's concerned, he'd rather die remembered as a warrior than spend the rest of his life serving someone else's ambitions from the shadows. And that's exactly what makes Criston Cole so dangerous. He's no longer fighting to survive, he's fighting for the legacy he'll leave behind. The real question now is, how much longer can he remain a threat to Rhaenyra's forces? Because the Riverlands army has already crossed the Blackwater Rush and destroyed the bridge behind them, cutting off Cole's smaller force. Even then, Criston refuses to back down. He declares that if he has to swim across the river himself, he'll do it. No matter what stands in his way, he isn't stopping. Now let's shift our attention to the 3 kings and 1 heir who are all moving toward Rhaenyra's throne. First, let's talk about Aemon's nightmare. After killing Ser Simon Strong and the remaining members of House Strong at Harrenhal earlier this season, Aemon is now recovering from his injuries inside the castle. Vhagar is nowhere to be seen, and while he heals, Alys Rivers is quietly taking care of him. Ever since claiming Vhagar, Aemon has never truly known fear. But now, without his dragon by his side, he's vulnerable for the first time in years. He's haunted by guilt over what he did to Aegon. And as far as both Aemon and the rest of the realm know, Aegon is dead. If you've been paying close attention, you'll notice something fascinating. This season, Aemon is going through the exact same psychological journey Daemon experienced at Harrenhal last season. Daemon was tormented by disturbing visions. He saw a young Rhaenyra, confronted memories of Viserys, and even witnessed prophetic dreams involving Helena's son. But by the end of those visions, Daemon found clarity and Alys Rivers played a major role in guiding him there. Now history seems to be repeating itself. Only this time, Aemond is the one trapped inside Harrenhal's grip. The castle has a way of forcing people to confront the parts of themselves they've spent years trying to bury. There's another interesting layer here. Daemon never gave Alys Rivers what she truly wanted, control over Harrenhal. Now it seems Alys has found a new path. she may be planning to secure her Renhal through Aemond instead. At one point in the episode, she even refers to Rhaenyra as an ungrateful queen, hinting that her loyalties may not be as straightforward as they appear. Aemond's behavior also becomes increasingly unsettling. In one scene, he grabs Alice and calls her mother, a strange and deeply revealing moment that exposes just how fractured his mental state has become. And then there's the matter of perspective. Aemond has always believed that his mother, Alicent, chose to support Aegon even though Aegon spent years bullying and humiliating him. What's remarkable is that despite all of that, young Aemond still admired his older brother. He never truly blamed Aegon for the pain he endured. Instead, he directed all of his hatred toward Rhaenyra's sons, believing they were responsible for everything that had gone wrong in his life. After claiming Vhagar, Aemond stopped seeing Aegon as someone worthy of respect. But now, with Vhagar gone, his body weakened, and his confidence shaken, all of those buried emotions are beginning to resurface. For the first time in a long time, Aemond isn't acting like an unstoppable warrior. He's acting like a broken man. But Aemond isn't the only one being forced to confront his past. His brother, Aegon, remembers their childhood very differently. While Harrenhal is exposing Aemond's deepest fears and insecurities, Aegon is going through his own moment of painful self-reflection. Earlier, Aemond told Alice Rivers that their mother always favored Aegon. Now, in a striking contrast, Aegon tells Larry Strong that Alicent always loved Aemond more. That's what makes this scene so tragic. The truth is, neither brother ever truly felt loved. Alicent wasn't driven by affection, not for Aegon, not for Aemond, and not even for Viserys. For years, she simply carried out what she believed was her duty. And more than anything else, the emotion that defined her was her resentment toward Rhaenyra. That resentment consumed so much of her life that, at times, defeating Rhaenyra became more important than nurturing her own children. As a result, both Aegon and Aemond grew up believing the exact same lie, that their mother loved the other brother more. It's a heartbreaking misunderstanding. And in many ways, it's one of the emotional foundations that helped ignite the Dance of the Dragons. Larys, however, doesn't let Aegon hide behind excuses. For perhaps the first time, someone speaks to him with complete honesty. He reminds Aegon that flying to Rook's Rest without thinking was his own decision. No one forced him to do it. He had every opportunity to prove himself as a king, and instead, he threw it all away. Rather than preparing for the responsibilities of the throne, Aegon surrounded himself with people who constantly agreed with him, indulged his every whim, and never challenged his decisions. He spent his time drinking, feasting, and chasing pleasure while ignoring the duties that came with wearing the crown. In Larry's eyes, Aegon has been a deeply flawed ruler and an even more flawed man. And honestly, moments like this often become the greatest turning points in a character's journey. Because hearing the brutal truth about yourself, without anyone trying to soften the blow, is one of the hardest experiences a person can face. But it's also the moment that has the power to change them forever. In my breakdown of the previous episode, I mentioned that the Battle of Rook's Rest wasn't just a devastating defeat for Aegon, it was also a wake-up call. For the first time in his life, Aegon was forced to face reality. He finally began to understand what it truly means to rule, and what Rhaenyra has been fighting for all along. This season has stripped away the privilege, arrogance, and false confidence that once defined him. Instead, it's forcing him to see the world as it really is. That's exactly why Aegon eventually agrees to Larry's plan of escaping by ship to Braavos. It seems like the safest option. But then, the episode throws us a major twist. A familiar face suddenly arrives to meet Aegon and Larys. Tywin Lannister. The last time we saw Tywin was during the Battle of the Gullet, when Shirako Lohar's fleet overwhelmed the Lannister ships. During the chaos, Tywin was thrown overboard, and for a while, it genuinely looked like he hadn't survived. Many fans assumed he was dead. We already know that his twin brother, Jason Lannister, has been killed. Earlier this season, we even saw Jason's lion and his severed head, confirming his fate. But Tywin is very much alive, and he hasn't come alone. He arrives with loyal men at his side and immediately challenges Larry's plan. Instead of fleeing across the narrow sea to Braavos, Tywin argues that they should head west, back to the ancestral home of House Lannister, Casterly Rock. In Tywin's eyes, that's where Aegon has the best chance to regroup, gather allies, and continue the fight for the Iron Throne. But no matter where Aegon decides to go next, there's one thing he has already accomplished. He's gotten his revenge on the man who humiliated him in the previous episode. With that score finally settled, Aegon and his small group now have only one objective: escape before their enemies catch up to them. Now, let's shift our focus to Daeron and the game Ormond Hightower is playing. Ormond has now begun referring to Daeron as the king, and that's no accident. He's carefully shaping the political narrative to strengthen the Green's position. In the previous episode, the moment Ormond realized that Aemond had disappeared without a trace, he immediately declared that Daeron was now the rightful king, and from that point on, every military campaign would be fought in his name. Now that campaign has officially begun. But Ormond isn't rushing into battle blindly. Every move he makes against Rhaenyra is calculated. At the moment, the small folk of King's Landing still seem to favor Rhaenyra. However, in the previous episode, anti-Rhaenyra messages began appearing throughout the city. In response, Rhaenyra sent the Gold Cloaks to hunt down the people responsible. Ormond saw that as an opportunity. Instead of confronting Rhaenyra directly, he targeted the Gold Cloaks themselves, hoping to gradually destabilize King's Landing from within. His goal isn't simply to win a battle, it's to create chaos. The City Watch was already struggling. Many of its members hadn't even been paid for their service. Even so, Daemon had once inspired them by promising they would receive double their wages once his side secured power. More importantly, the commander of the Gold Cloaks was Luther Largent, one of Daemon's most trusted and loyal supporters. As long as Luther remained in command, the City Watch was never likely to betray Daemon's cause. But now, that advantage is gone. Luther Largent has been killed, along with many members of the City Watch, and with their leadership shattered, King's Landing is beginning to descend into exactly the kind of disorder Ormond Hightower has been planning all along. This is exactly how unrest begins to spread through a city. Think about the situation from the Gold Cloaks' perspective. How are they supposed to keep peace in King's Landing when their own men are being killed? And many of them still haven't been paid. That's precisely the weakness Ormond Hightower is exploiting. His objective isn't just to attack Rhaenyra, it's to keep her tied down inside King's Landing. If she's constantly dealing with riots, assassinations, and growing instability in the capital, she won't be able to focus on the larger war that's unfolding around her. And while Rhaenyra is distracted, the rest of the Green forces continue closing in. The Baratheon army is marching under Daeron's banner, giving Ormond even more time to strengthen the Green's position. Throughout the episode, Daeron is learning from Ormond's leadership. But at the same time, Ormond constantly reminds everyone that he's still the more experienced strategist. Even when Daeron thinks he's beginning to understand the game, Ormond proves he's always one step ahead. Still, one thing is undeniable. Using Daeron's name, Ormond has successfully put Rhaenyra under tremendous pressure. There's another detail that many viewers may have missed. The man secretly working inside King's Landing for Ormond is the very same soldier we saw earlier this season in episode 2. He's the guard who overheard Alicent and Helena discussing what should happen if Daemon and Rhaenyra ever attacked the city on Dragonback. They specifically instructed that no one was to engage them directly. Now that same soldier has become one of Ormond's agents inside the capital. His job is simple: spread fear, fuel disorder, and help plunge King's Landing into complete chaos from within. And judging by everything we've seen so far, that plan is already working. Now let's talk about Helena. Just as the previous episode hinted, it's now heavily implied that Helena is pregnant. That creates a terrifying dilemma for Alicent. She doesn't want this child to be born, not because she doesn't love her daughter, but because she believes the baby's future is already doomed. In Alicent's mind, if Rhaenyra ultimately wins this war, she will never allow another potential Green heir to survive. That fear drives nearly every decision Alicent makes in this episode. At one point, Alicent and Helena even attempt to escape. During their conversation, Helena quietly says that she wants to see the moon. Alicent responds by telling her that looking through the window should be enough. Now, I don't want to spoil anything for those of you who haven't read the books, but I will say this. The moment Alicent says that line about the window, every book reader immediately knew what it was hinting at. It's a small piece of dialogue, but it's loaded with meaning. We'll understand exactly why in the episodes to come. There's another fascinating discovery in this scene. While searching for a way out, Alicent and Helena uncover a hidden passage connected to their chambers, although, for now, it appears to be blocked. Of course, fans of this world already know that the Red Keep is filled with secret tunnels and hidden passageways. These passages have played a major role throughout both House of the Dragon and Game of Thrones. Back in Season 1, Episode 4, Rhaenyra used one of these secret routes to sneak out of the Red Keep and explore King's Landing. Later, in Episode 6, she used another hidden passage to secretly overhear a conversation involving Ser Harwin Strong and his father. Those same tunnels also allowed Blood and Cheese to infiltrate the Red Keep and assassinate Prince Jaehaerys. And now, Helena has discovered yet another one. If you're a longtime fan of the franchise, you'll remember these passageways appearing in Game of Thrones as well, when Varys used them to help Tyrion Lannister escape King's Landing. According to the history of Westeros, these secret tunnels were commissioned by Maegor Targaryen, the son of Aegon the Conqueror. Their purpose was simple. If the Red Keep ever fell under attack, the royal family would always have a hidden escape route. Centuries later, those same passageways continue to shape the fate of the Targaryen dynasty. The Red Keep is home to an entire maze of hidden tunnels. Some of them lead to secret exits. Others are filled with traps, dead ends, and passages that haven't been used in generations. And right now, Alicent and Helena find themselves trapped inside one of those forgotten tunnels. Now let's move on to one of the episode's most fascinating scenes, Ormond Hightower's history lesson. At this point, Ormond is quickly emerging as the true mastermind and arguably the main villain of the season. By tightening his grip on strategic locations like Tumbleton, he isn't just winning territory, he's slowly suffocating Rhaenyra's entire war effort. During one conversation, Ormond gives Daeron a lesson about a kingdom that once stood against the Targaryens and their dragons. That kingdom is Dorne. Even during the Dance of the Dragons, Dorne was never part of the Targaryen realm. Unlike the rest of Westeros, Dorne wasn't ruled by kings. Its rulers carried the titles of prince and princess. Ormond then recalls the story of Princess Marya Martell, who confronted Aegon the Conqueror's sister, Queen Rhaenys Targaryen, during Aegon's campaign to unite the Seven Kingdoms. Rather than surrendering, Marya simply sent Rhaenys away. And she reminded the Targaryens of the words that define House Martell: unbowed, unbent, unbroken, a promise that Dorne would never kneel, never surrender, and never be broken. House Martell holds a unique place in Targaryen history. They are the only great house to successfully bring down one of Aegon the Conqueror's dragons during the conquest itself. Whenever the Targaryens launched a dragon attack, the Dornish refused to fight on the enemy's terms. Instead of standing in open battle, they abandoned their cities and castles, disappearing into the deserts and mountains. Then, the moment the dragons left, they returned and struck back. It was a brutal war of patience, strategy, and survival. As long as the elderly Princess Marya Martell lived, Aegon the Conqueror was never able to conquer Dorne. Not only did he fail to claim the kingdom, he even lost one of his dragons in the attempt. That's exactly why Ormond tells this story to Daeron. His point isn't that dragons are weak. His point is that even the most powerful force in the world can be resisted by people who refuse to bend. Sometimes, determination and strategy can accomplish what sheer strength cannot. And no kingdom embodied that spirit better than Dorne. And that's exactly the mindset Ormond wants Daeron to adopt. Never bow, never break. That's the very idea behind this episode's title, Unbowed, Unbent. Now, let's turn our attention to Rhaenyra, because while the Greens continue gaining momentum, she's becoming increasingly restless. And the more pressure she's under, the more mistakes she begins to make. One of her biggest decisions was leaving the original small council on Dragonstone behind and establishing a new council in King's Landing. But instead of strengthening her rule, that decision has only created more confusion. Her treasury is nearly empty. To keep the small folk fed, she's resorted to seizing food and supplies from noble houses. But that's only a temporary fix. It doesn't solve the kingdom's growing economic crisis. At the same time, the High Septon has refused to fully support her, weakening her legitimacy even further. She also refuses to listen to the advice of her new dragon riders. Instead of treating them as valuable allies, she constantly lectures them, pushing away the very people she desperately needs. And then there's another major problem. Rhaenyra has begun breaking the promises she once made. Back in Season 2, Episode 5, Jacaerys negotiated an agreement with Forrest Fry and Subita Fry. In exchange for allowing the Winter Wolves to cross the Twins, the Freys were promised Harrenhal once the war was won. Now, Rhaenyra is backing away from that commitment. Naturally, Subita Fry isn't happy about it. She has now demanded a formal seat on Rhaenyra's small council, insisting that House Fry deserves a real voice in the government if its support is going to be taken for granted. There's no doubt that Rhaenyra is under enormous pressure, but that pressure is beginning to divide her own inner circle. Subita Fry is present at the council, yet no one has even decided what position she's supposed to hold. Her hand, Corlys Velaryon, isn't there. Instead, his son Alan is attending in his place. Lord Manderley technically serves as Master of Coin, but with the treasury running dry, that title is becoming increasingly meaningless. Once the money runs out completely, it won't be the nobles who suffer first. It will be the small folk. And when hungry people lose hope, they become impossible to control. Perhaps the biggest division of all lies within Rhaenyra herself. She's caught between two very different voices. Mysaria urges one path, while Daemon argues for another. Daemon believes their immediate priority should be restoring order in King's Landing and dealing with the growing crisis surrounding the Gold Cloaks before the situation spirals completely out of control. Daemon believes they should deal with the growing crisis surrounding King's Landing and the Gold Cloaks first, while the others argue that their focus should remain on confronting Vhagar. Meanwhile, Mysaria is keeping a close eye on everything happening around Rhaenyra, but Alicent warns her that the loyalty of the Dragon Riders shouldn't be taken for granted, it has to be earned and handled carefully. On top of that, after the Battle of the Gullet, Rhaenyra no longer has the naval fleet she once relied on. That leaves her vulnerable to attacks from the sea and puts her in an even weaker strategic position. It's no surprise, then, that Rhaenyra begins turning to faith. When every option seems to be falling apart, people often look for hope wherever they can find it. Her anxiety is becoming more obvious with every passing episode, and that's exactly what Ormond Hightower wanted. His strategy is working perfectly. As the City Watch in King's Landing is quietly being eliminated from within, nothing may be able to stop the capital from descending into complete chaos. The real question now is, can Rhaenyra regain control before everything slips through her fingers? Now, let's talk about Vhagar. Adam and Baelot are tasked with finding the Great Dragon, and during their journey, the episode hints at a growing romantic connection between the two. It'll be interesting to see whether the show's writers stay faithful to the books or decide to take Adam and Baela's story in a different direction. As for Vhagar, the episode mentions that she was last seen near Windwater Town, where she had been burning fields. Since Vhagar is the largest dragon alive, she constantly needs food to sustain herself. That suggests she's wandered far away in search of prey, putting a significant distance between herself and Aemond. And that wraps up the breakdown. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to leave a like, subscribe to Loreflick, and turn on notifications so you never miss our next House of the Dragon breakdown. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.